Bardish Chagger is Canada's Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth, and she is with me now in our studios. Minister, good to see you again.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. Why has the government come to the conclusion now that this type of therapy must be the subject of criminal code protections and offences? What evidence have you relied on here?
So we've been having conversations from coast to coast to coast when it comes to intentional conversion therapy that's trying to change somebody's gender identity or their sexual orientation. We know it doesn't work, we know it's destructive, we know it's harmful, and that's why it's important that the Government of Canada step up. Minister Lametti had sent a message to his counterparts before the election to say that we would be taking action on this file, informed by Canadians, informed by organizations, academics, experts, and the list goes on. Today we had a good announcement about the legislation that we've introduced in the House of Commons.
Right.
This is probably the most progressive legislation in the world, and we had people that were there, including Reverend Dr. Sherry DeNovo, who actually informed the province of Ontario legislation.
She's a former MPP in Ontario. This bill provides, let me walk through it a bit. The bill provides criminal code amendments to prevent minors from receiving conversion therapy, but it's not an outright ban on the practice, since it would still allow conversion therapy to non-minors who want it, as long as it's not a paid service or not advertised. Have I got that right? Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yep, so
okay.
Competent individuals that are adults that are able to make their own choices are still able to make their choices.
But you and Mr. Lametti said today at the news conference, suggested it's a cruel practice that can lead to lifelong trauma, and there's lots of evidence of that. So I guess if I'm wondering if it's a cruel practice, why is it being permitted at all? Why isn't this an outright ban?
Adults are able to make their decisions and their choices. That's part of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Adults choose to consume alcohol, smoke cigarettes, now even cannabis. Those are choices that they make. What we know is that when it comes to minors, that the federal government has a responsibility to enact, to bring forward legislation that actually ensures that every Canadian can realize their potential, be their true selves, and that's what this legislation does. LGBTQ2 rights are human rights, and today the Government of Canada is acting, and it's really about protecting LGBTQ2 Canadians. We had people come today to share their stories, and what was demonstrated is that we still have a lot more work to do.
Right.
We know that there are vulnerable populations within our country that are not able to succeed, and it's unfortunate. There are people from these communities that have said, like, I've never interacted with conversion therapy, and that's great. If you have a supportive network around you that's allowing you to realize your potential, that's great. But we want an inclusive Canada for every Canadian, and that's why this ban is so important.
Because I know some activists had been proposing some kind of an outright ban. If you make the practice illegal, even though adults make their own choices, if you make it illegal, it provides you with I suppose a different message to anybody providing the service, even if it's not for money and even if it doesn't involve advertising. Is this a question of just like you're into some gray area of the law there? If you were to try to enforce that kind of a ban, you're not sure you could do it.
So it's exactly it's the most progressive legislation. We've taken it as close to the line that we can to ensure that we're still protecting charter rights for Canadians. What we know is that it's a practice that does not work. Research shows that conversion therapy causes great harm. When it comes to mental health, suicide rates, it's destructive practice, and the more I've been in this portfolio and having these conversations, the more that I knew that we needed to take action sooner than later.
How do you legally prove if someone's being forced to undergo conversion therapy against their will? I think that's going to be one of the challenges. Presumably that would require a complaint from somebody who's been forced to undergo it, and then some sort of a criminal investigation. The government's prepared to believes those resources need to be devoted to eradicate this practice.
We've got strong laws in our country, and I have confidence in our institutions to ensure that the law is upheld. And I think that's what will take place. Of course, we'll have to work with provinces and territories, but 3 provinces have already put forward a conversion therapy ban. If you look at PEI, Nova Scotia, Ontario, this practice has already been taking place in Ontario for 5 years.
And other cities as well, Calgary and Edmonton.
Cities have been taking the charge as well. What's important is that all Canadians from coast to coast to coast today know that the Government of Canada has introduced legislation to ban this practice across the country.
You're going to hear from the critics. You probably already have through the process, and some of them are suggesting, look, this will stop parents from having conversations
entirely the
with
opposite.
their children about sexuality and about
And the politics of fear will not work here. And what it is, this is about saving young people's lives. These are about real conversations. Discussions about someone's sexual orientation or gender identity are not targeted in this legislation. What is targeted is forcing an individual to undergo conversion therapy that they're not asking for. I've heard a lot of stories from Canadians, and I'm so thankful for the family in which I was raised. I am a person of faith, and I was taught to love every individual around me and to see the best in them, because people are good people. What we know is that there's some bad things happening, and we cannot stand idly by and not take action. The stories that we heard today from individuals, and a lot more people are sharing their stories, these people are traumatized for the rest of their lives. I want them to know they have a partner in the federal government. I want them to know that they matter, and we are listening to them, and we are going to work with them to ensure that they can succeed and contribute in any way that they want to.
I should point out in our conversation that quickly on the penalty side, the maximum 5 years for offences involving the minors that we
And they're hybrid.
talked a bit earlier, and their hybrid offences, and 2 years involving the advertising or the offering of the service. So let me just finish on this. So you're in a minority parliament. Have you got buy-in from the other parties?
Today is I'll tell you, it's a really exciting day. This legislation started not quite as far as we got to, but it took many people from across the country to do a lot of great work, and I really want to thank them for really pushing us. NDP MP Randall Garrison was there with us at our press conference
today,
and spoke. And you know, when you read the legislation, because no one saw it until today after question period, once it had been introduced, there was somewhat of a satisfaction. We all know we have a lot more work to do, but our government has enacted the most progressive legislation in the world. And the individuals that were there, I will never forget my conversation with the one individual, and his reaction was, "Man, you went further than I thought you would." And I said, "Thank you for helping us get there." Right. And we're going to do a lot more.
Bardish, Chagger, thanks for your time today, and we'll see how this plays through the legislative process in the House, but it sounds like I think we heard from the Conservatives as well that they are supporting in principle, but they want to see the details of the bill and study it a bit. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.